What if the golden years you've spent a lifetime chasing, those sun-drenched visions of freedom, travel, and a life unshackled from stress, crumble into something unrecognizable? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine it. You're standing at the threshold of retirement, the grand finale of decades spent toiling under fluorescent lights or braving early morning commutes. You can almost taste the salty breeze of that long-promised beach trip, hear the clink of a glass raised in toast to a stress-free existence. But then, years down the line, you pause, look back, and see not a paradise found, but a quiet graveyard of unfulfilled dreams and subtle regrets. For countless retirees, that shimmering mirage of endless relaxation morphs into something far less glamorous. Boredom that gnaws at the edges of each day, financial anxieties that cast long shadows, and a once vibrant sense of purpose that slips through their fingers like sand. In this deep dive, we're peeling back the curtain on 6 haunting reasons why some retirees come to rue the day they left the workforce, even when they were dead, certain it was their ticket to happiness. Whether you're teetering on the brink of retirement, wading through its uncharted waters, or simply peering ahead to life's next act, these revelations might just tilt your world on its axis, and they could be the lifeline you didn't know you needed. Stay with me until the final word, because grasping these pitfalls now could light the way to a retirement that's not just survivable, but truly alive with meaning, starting this very moment. 8. Number 1. The void of purpose. Picture a morning bathed in soft light, the kind where the sun creeps through the blinds and there's no shrill alarm to shatter the peace. For decades, your job was the heartbeat of your existence, a pulsing rhythm of deadlines, meetings, and tasks that tugged you out of bed and into the world. It wasn't always glamorous. Maybe it was the grind of a factory floor, the chaos of a classroom, or the hum of an office cubicle. But it gave your days shape, a scaffolding of responsibility that held everything together. Then retirement arrives, and that structure collapses like a house of cards in a sudden gust. The silence that follows isn't just quiet, it's a cavernous void, echoing with a single, disorienting question. Now what? The initial rush of liberation, those first few weeks of sleeping in, sipping coffee on the porch with no clock to punch, fades like a sugar high, leaving behind a hollow ache. Work, for all its flaws, wasn't just about money. It was a compass needle pointing you toward purpose, a mirror reflecting your identity, a steady drumbeat of accomplishment. Whether you were sketching blueprints that turned into skyscrapers, guiding a student toward an epiphany, or simply keeping the gears of a small business turning, there was always a target, a reason to push forward. Strip that away, and time becomes a shapeless expanse. Hours that once flew by now crawl, days blending into weeks with no markers to distinguish them, like a fog rolling over a landscape you used to know by heart. Consider Thomas, a 76-year-old man whose life story could fill a book. If only he'd found the will to write it. With his shock of silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose weathered by years of squinting at technical drawings, and hands that still twitch as if reaching for a tool, he's the picture of a man who lived for his work. For over 4 decades, Thomas was an engineer, a maestro of steel and concrete, designing bridges that spanned rivers and highways that stitched cities together. His mind thrived on the puzzles, calculating load limits, tweaking designs until they sang with efficiency. Retirement loomed like a prize at the end of a marathon, a chance to trade his hard hat for a hammock, his early mornings for lazy sunrises. He'd earned it, he told himself, picturing days free of conference calls and late-night revisions. But reality had other plans. Within a year, the thrill of untimed days dulled into a restless monotony. He'd sit on his weathered porch swing, the creak of its chains the only sound breaking the stillness. His coffee growing cold as he stared into a horizon that offered no challenges. The woodworking bench he'd bought sat dusty in the garage. The garden he'd planned grew wild with neglect. Nothing matched the electric hum of a problem solved, a project completed. He felt unmoored, a ship drifting without a port, until a chance flyer caught his eye, a call for volunteers at the local science center. There, amid the chatter of curious kids and the whir of simple machines, Thomas found his footing. He'd lean over a table, cluttered with gears and pulleys, his voice steady as he explained how a lever could lift the world, his eyes alight with a fire he thought he'd lost. The children called him Mr. Tom, and their wide-eyed awe stitched his sense of worth back together, thread by thread. Experts will tell you Thomas isn't alone. This loss of purpose blindsides retirees like a storm they didn't see brewing. Those fleeting victories at work, nailing a presentation, troubleshooting a glitch, even sharing a laugh over a co-worker's bad coffee, wove a tapestry of meaning that's tough to replicate. Without it, the soul grows restless, searching for a new anchor. The happiest retirees, the ones who glow with contentment, don't surrender to the void. They chase it off with intention. Some mentor young professionals, passing down hard-won wisdom. Others plunge into volunteering, their hands busy with causes that matter. A few unearth passions, painting, pottery, poetry, buried under years of 9 to 5. Retirement isn't the death knell of purpose, it's a blank page begging for a new story, but you've got to pick up the pen. Without something to ignite your mornings, to give your days weight and your nights a sense of triumph, it's all too easy to slip into a gray haze, watching life pass by from the sidelines. Thomas learned that purpose doesn't punch out when you do. It's a flame that needs tending, and the fuel is yours to find. Number 2, the echo of silence. Imagine the hum of a busy office, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the low murmur of voices swapping stories over lukewarm coffee. Or maybe it's the bustle of a shop floor, the clang of tools and the rhythm of footsteps, or the quiet camaraderie of a classroom between lessons. Now, strip it all away. For so many, work wasn't just a place to earn a living. It was a living, breathing web of connection, a daily dance of familiar faces and fleeting hellos. The co-worker who always had a sarcastic quip, the receptionist who knew your coffee order, the clients whose names you could recite like a roll call. They were the threads of a social tapestry you didn't even realize you'd woven. Then, retirement snips those threads, and the silence that settles in isn't just peaceful. It's a hollow echo bouncing off the walls of an empty room. At first, it feels like a sweet reprieve, a chance to escape the petty dramas, the forced small talk, the endless meetings. You trade the chaos for calm, the water cooler gossip for the chirp of birds outside your window. But as the days stretch into weeks, then months, that calm curdles into something heavier. Loneliness, a shadow that creeps in uninvited, dimming the light of those untethered hours. Work, for all its grind, handed you a built-in community, a social heartbeat that pulsed without effort. Without it, the world feels smaller, quieter, and the isolation can tighten around you like a fog you can't outrun. Take Robert, a 74-year-old man with a salesman's easy grin, crooked from years of charming clients, and a voice that still carries the warm, gravelly edge of someone who could sell ice to a blizzard. For decades, his career in sales was a whirlwind of motion, driving dusty back roads to meet farmers, shaking hands in polished boardrooms, trading laughs with strangers who became regulars. His days were a symphony of voices, a kaleidoscope of faces, each interaction a note in the melody of his life. Retirement beckoned like a soft landing, a chance to swap the road warrior's life for a rocking chair on his front porch, the horizon stretching out over the rolling hills of his small town. He pictured quiet mornings with the newspaper, the rustle of leaves his only company, a well-earned solitude after years of noise. But the quiet didn't soothe. It suffocated. The phone, once buzzing with calls from clients and colleagues, sat silent on the kitchen counter, gathering dust beside a mug he rarely bothered to refill. The mailbox, once stuffed with invitations to industry dinners or casual beers, offered only bills and flyers. He'd sit in his faded armchair, the TV flickering with game shows he didn't care about. The laugh track a mocking reminder of the banter he missed. The energy of a crowded room, the quick wit of a negotiation, the simple nod from a passerby, it was all gone. And the silence pressed in like a weight on his chest. Robert's wife, Ellen, noticed it first, the way his shoulders slumped a little lower each day, the way his stories about the good old days grew longer, tinged with a wistful ache. She'd nudge him to call old buddies, but the numbers felt foreign now, the connections frayed by time. It wasn't until a crisp autumn morning, when he stumbled across a flyer for a local walking group pinned to a coffee shop bulletin board, that the tide began to turn. He laced up sneakers he hadn't worn since his sales days, the leather creaking with disuse, and joined a handful of retirees crunching through fallen leaves along a wooded trail. The chatter started small, weather, grandkids, but soon blossomed into laughter, shared gripes about creaky knees, plans for the next outing. Then came the food bank, where he'd stack cans of soup and trade quips with volunteers half his age, his voice booming again with purpose. The world widened, the silence retreated, and Robert felt the pulse of connection return, like a radio dial tuned back to a station he'd lost. Science backs up what Robert lived. Isolation isn't just a feeling, it's a thief. Studies paint a grim picture. Retirees cut off from social ties face higher odds of depression, memory slipping like sand through a sieve, even heart disease creeping in as the body mirrors the mind's retreat. We're built for each other, wired to thrive on the messy, beautiful dance of human contact. When work yanks that away, it's not enough to wait for the phone to ring. You've got to seek it out. Doctors and therapists preach intention. Join a book club where pages spark debates. Sign up for a community garden where dirt-stained hands forge friendships. Volunteer at a shelter where every thank you rebuilds the bridge to belonging. It doesn't take much. A weekly card game, a standing date with a neighbor, a gym class where sweat and smiles mingle. Robert found his lifeline in motion and service, but the path is yours to carve. If this strikes a chord, toss number 2 into the comments. I'd love to know you're out there nodding along. And if you're not already with us, hit subscribe and tap that bell. We've got more ground to cover, and I'd hate for you to miss it. Number 3, the weight of money. Envision retirement as a grand voyage. You've charted the course, packed your savings like a sturdy suitcase, and set sail with the wind of freedom at your back. The horizon glitters with promise. No more clocking in. No more budgets stretched thin by the demands of the daily grind. You've earned this, you tell yourself, a treasure chest of hard-won dollars to spend on sunsets and spontaneity. But what happens when the seas grow rougher than you planned? A storm of unexpected bills, a leaking roof, a doctor's visit that wasn't in the script rolls in, and that suitcase starts to feel lighter than it should. For so many retirees, the dream of a worry-free golden age slams into a stark reality. Money, once a steady river flowing from paychecks, dries up into a trickling stream, and every wave of expense threatens to capsize the calm you thought you'd secured. Inflation creeps up like a tide, eroding the edges of your nest egg. Longevity stretches the journey longer than your map accounted for. What felt like a fortune at 65 dwindles by 75, and suddenly, the freedom you craved comes with a new weight. Financial stress, heavier than any deadline you left behind. John, a 78-year-old with a face carved by years of laughter and worry, knows this burden too well. Picture him in his prime. A wiry man with a calculator's precision, a mop of dark hair he'd rake back during late-night budgeting sessions, a gleam in his eye as he planned a future free of cubicles. For 40 years, he crunched numbers in an accounting firm, squirreling away every bonus, every tax refund, building a savings fortress he was sure would stand the test of time. Retirement came at 62, a golden handshake from a career well fought, and he stepped into it with swagger. Trips to the Grand Canyon with his wife Linda, dinners at that Italian place with the garlic bread he couldn't resist, a new set of golf clubs gleaming in the garage. The first years sparkled like polished silver. They'd wake to the scent of pine on a campsite, snap photos of desert sunrises, laugh over wine-stained tablecloths. But then the cracks appeared. A knee surgery he hadn't foreseen sliced through his reserves like a knife through butter, a $20,000 bill that insurance only half covered. The cost of living inched up, gas jumping $1 a gallon, groceries climbing as if they were luxury goods, and his once roomy budget shrank, tightening around him like a belt pulled one notch too far. Nights found John in his cluttered den, the glow of a desk lamp casting shadows over a spreadsheet he'd update obsessively. The hum of the fridge in the next room punctuated the quiet as he tallied bills. The plumber for that dripping faucet, the rising premium on Linda's meds, the property taxes that seemed to mock his fixed income. He'd sit there, glasses fogging with frustration, the man who'd once balanced corporate ledgers now fretting over the price of milk. The worry wasn't loud. It was a low, constant hum, a thief of sleep and peace. Linda would find him there, her slippers shuffling on the hardwood, and she'd nudge him to bed with a gentle, "We'll figure it out." But figuring it out meant change. At 70, he dusted off his old briefcase and took a part-time consulting gig. Small businesses needing tax advice, a handful of hours a week. It wasn't the grind he'd escaped, but a lifeline, extra cash to pad the gaps, and a quiet pride in knowing he could still steer the ship. The weight didn't vanish, but it lightened, and he'd smile again over morning coffee, the steam curling up like a small victory. John's story isn't rare. Financial stress ambushes retirees who misjudge the terrain. The original script mentions it plainly. Income stops, expenses don't. But it's more than that. In your working years, money flowed predictably. Paydays were a heartbeat, pulsing every 2 weeks, a rhythm you could dance to even when bills spiked. Retirement cuts the music, and every dollar spent feels like a step closer to the edge. Early splurges, those bucket list cruises, the kitchen remodel to impress the neighbors, can drain reserves before the real storms hit. Experts wave red flags. A 65-year-old today might live to 90, and $500,000 sounds grand until you stretch it across 25 years with prices climbing every one of them. Inflation isn't a buzzword, it's a slow bleed, turning a 3 loaf of bread into fires, a $50 doctor's visit into 80. Retirees like John regret not building a buffer. Passive income from a rental, dividends from stocks, or keeping a toe in the workforce for flexibility. Number 4. The fog of the mind. Think back to a day when your mind was a live wire, crackling with energy as you untangled a knotty problem at work, juggled a dozen tasks, or fired off quick-witted replies in a meeting. It wasn't always fun. Maybe it was a spreadsheet that refused to balance, a customer's complaint you had to soothe, or a deadline that loomed like a thundercloud. But it kept you sharp, didn't it? The gears turned, the neurons sparked, and even on the toughest days, you felt the hum of a brain fully engaged. Now imagine that hum fading to a whisper. Retirement can be a thief of that sharpness, slipping in like a fog over a once clear horizon. Without the daily workout of decisions, challenges, and conversations, the mind softens, names slip through your grasp. Like wet soap, focus blurs, and the world feels a little fuzzier around the edges. It's not just an annoyance, it's a quiet erosion, a drift into sluggishness that catches retirees off guard. Work, for all its grind, was a gym for your brain, lifting weights of logic, sprinting through problem-solving, stretching with every new skill learned. Take that away, and the mental muscles slacken, leaving you wondering where the clarity went. Barbara, a 73-year-old with a teacher's steady gaze and a cascade of gray curls she still pins back like it's 1985, felt this fade in her bones. For over 40 years, she ruled a classroom. Chalk dust on her fingers, stacks of essays spilling across her desk, her voice weaving through lessons on Shakespeare and algebra with equal grace. Her mind was a dynamo, always spinning, crafting lesson plans that sparked epiphanies, decoding the latest educational software, keeping pace with students whose energy could light a city. Retirement arrived like a long exhale. She traded her gradebook for a rocking chair, her alarm clock for the soft trill of birds outside her window in a sleepy suburb. She pictured cozy mornings with tea, novels she'd never had time to read, maybe a knitting project to keep her hands busy. At first, it was bliss. She'd sit on her screened porch, the scent of jasmine drifting in, pages turning under her fingers. But the bliss dulled. The books piled up, half-read, the knitting needles gathered dust in a basket, and the TV flickered on more often. A parade of reruns and reality shows she couldn't quite follow. She'd catch herself mid-sentence, groping for a word that danced just out of reach, or staring at a grocery list she'd forgotten to finish. Conversations with her daughter, once sharp and lively, grew halting. She'd trail off, embarrassed, as names and dates slipped away. It wasn't age, she realized. It was idleness, a mind left to wander without a tether. The shift unnerved her. Barbara had always prided herself on her quickness. Her students called her the walking encyclopedia, a title she wore like a badge. Now, she felt like a radio losing its signal, static creeping in where clarity once reigned. It gnawed at her until a friend dragged her to a book club. 6 women in a cozy library room, chairs creaking under them, pages rustling as they debated Austen and Atwood. The first meeting, she sat quiet, nervous her thoughts wouldn't hold. But then a question sparked, something about pride and prejudice, and her voice rose, steady and sure, cutting through the room. The fog lifted a little. She went home, buzzing, her mind alight, and signed up for an online course the next day. History this time, lectures streaming through her laptop as she scribbled notes in a spiral-bound pad. Months later, she'd sit at her kitchen table, sunlight spilling over a clutter of books and pens, grinning as she traced the fall of Rome or argued with a professor's take on the Renaissance. Her memory snapped back, her focus sharpened, and the days felt electric again. She was Barbara, not just a retiree, but a student of the world once more. Researchers nod knowingly at stories like hers. The brain thrives on challenge. Work handed it puzzles daily, from troubleshooting a printer jam to negotiating a raise. Retirement yanks that away. And without a substitute, the decline isn't just possible, it's probable. Studies stack up like bricks. Mental engagement staves off dementia, keeps memory crisp, lifts mood like a shot of espresso to the soul. The sharpest retirees don't coast on autopilot. They chase the spark. Some tackle crosswords until the grid's a triumph of ink. Others learn Spanish, their tongues twisting around new syllables with glee. A man down Barbara's street took up the guitar, calluses blooming on fingers that hadn't played since college. A woman across town volunteers at a museum, reciting facts to wide-eyed kids. Social ties matter too. Those book club debates, a neighbor's chat over the fence. They're fuel for a mind that refuses to rust. Experts push a mental fitness routine. Read voraciously, wrestle with Sudoku, teach yourself coding, anything to keep the gears grinding. Barbara found her lifeline in learning, but the path's wide open. Retirement isn't a fade to gray. It's a chance to keep the mind blazing. If this rings true, toss number 4 in the comments. I'd love to know you're with me. And if you're not subscribed, jump in, hit that button, ring the bell, because we're not slowing down. Number 5, the ghost of identity. Who are you? It's a simple question, one you've answered 1,000 times over a lifetime. Over backyard barbecues, at cocktail parties, in the quiet moments of self-reflection. For years, the reply rolled off your tongue like a reflex. I'm a mechanic. I'm a nurse. I'm the guy who keeps this place running. Your job wasn't just what you did, it was who you were, a cornerstone of identity chiseled into the bedrock of your being. It shaped how you stood in the world, shoulders back, voice steady, how others saw you too, with nods of respect, or a quick, good to see you that carried weight. Work handed you a badge, a title, a role that tethered you to something bigger, a purpose, a place, a story. Then, retirement sweeps in, and that badge vanishes like smoke in the wind. The question, who am I now, hangs heavy, unanswered, as the mirror reflects a stranger where a familiar face once stood. The shift isn't just practical. It's a gut punch, a quiet unraveling of the self you spent decades building. From indispensable to undefined, the fall can leave you reeling, a ghost of your former life haunting the edges of each day. Work gave you more than a paycheck. It was a currency of worth, a rhythm of recognition, and when it's gone, the silence can feel like a loss of soul. Richard, a 77-year-old with a lawman's stern brow and eyes that still scan a room like it's a crime scene, lived this unraveling down to his marrow. For 35 years, he wore the badge of a police officer, first pounding the beat in a gritty downtown precinct, then rising to captain, his name etched on a brass plate that gleamed with authority. His days were a symphony of action, the crackle of the radio spitting out calls, the weight of his boots on cracked pavement, the adrenaline of a chase, or the calm of a crisis diffused. He was the man people turned to, citizens with trembling voices, rookies with wide eyes, even his wife Marie, who'd teased that he could command a room with a single look. Retirement loomed as a reward, a chance to hang up the holster and trade sirens for the soft hum of a fishing reel on a quiet lake. He pictured it vividly, mornings by the water, the sun glinting off ripples, a thermos of black coffee steaming in his hand. No more midnight shifts or paperwork mountains. The first weeks delivered, pole in hand, he'd cast lines into the stillness, the world reduced to bird calls and the occasional splash. But the stillness grew stifling. He'd drive past his old precinct, the brick building squat and unyielding, and feel a pang as officers waved, friendly but distant, their lives moving on without him. At home, the recliner swallowed him whole, the TV droning with news he once shaped, now just a spectator. Marie noticed the change, the way his stories looped back to busts and stakeouts, the way his hands fidgeted without a purpose to grip. "You're still you," she'd say, her voice soft over the clatter of dinner plates, but he wasn't so sure. The respect he'd earned, the weight of his word, the rhythm of a day that mattered, it had slipped away, leaving a man who felt like a shadow in his own life. Friends stopped asking his advice. His kids, grown and busy, didn't need the old captain's wisdom. The lake lost its charm, the coffee grew bitter, and Richard wondered if he'd traded his identity for a myth of leisure. Then came a call, a young sergeant, nervous and green, asking if he'd mentor a batch of recruits. He hesitated, then agreed, stepping into a training room thick with the scent of sweat and ambition. There, barking orders and sharing war stories, his voice found its old steel. Later, he volunteered at a community center, teaching kids about safety, their questions reigniting a spark he thought had gutted out. Richard rebuilt himself, not as captain anymore, but as a guide, a sage, a man whose worth didn't retire with his badge. This ghost haunts so many. Identity tied to a career doesn't dissolve easily. The original script hints at it. Work gave you a role, and retirement steals it. But it's deeper. A nurse misses the trust in a patient's eyes. A teacher, the hush of a room hanging on their words. A mechanic, the satisfaction of an engine purring back to life. Without that, the days feel unmoored, and the world moves on, leaving you to wonder where you fit. Psychologists see it often. Retirees grappling with depression, a crisis of self that lingers like a bruise. The fix isn't simple, but it's there. Redefine the badge. Some, like Richard, mentor, pouring experience into new minds. Others turn hobbies into callings, woodworking benches humming, canvases blooming with paint. A woman in Richardstown started a gardening club, her hands deep in soil, her name now synonymous with roses. Retirement isn't an end to identity. It's a pivot, a chance to craft a new story from the chapters you've lived. The happiest retirees don't mourn the ghost. They invite it in, reshape it, and step into a self that shines anew. If this stirs you, drop number 5 in the comments. I'd love to hear your echo. And if you're not with us yet, subscribe, tap that bell. We're still chasing the horizon. Number 6, the sting of wasted time. Imagine the first day of retirement stretching out before you like an endless summer, an ocean of time, shimmering with possibility, waves of days lapping at your feet. No more 6 a.m. alarms, no more calendars choked with meetings, just a wide, unbroken expanse to fill with dreams you've nursed through years of hustle, trips to far-off shores, books to write, friendships to rekindle. It feels infinite, doesn't it? A gift you'll unwrap slowly, savoring each ribbon as it falls. But time has a way of slipping through your fingers, a current stronger than it seems. Years later, you look back, and the horizon's closer than you thought. Too many of those days spent drifting, not sailing, and the sting of regret bites deep. For some retirees, the realization hits like a cold wind. They didn't seize the hours, didn't chase the sparks, and now the chances they postponed feel like ghosts whispering, "What if?" The trips never booked, the skills never mastered, the moments never claimed. They pile up, a ledger of wasted time that weighs heavier than any missed deadline ever did. Retirement's promise of freedom can curdle into a trap, lulling you into a rhythm of routine, TV flickering, days blurring, until you wake up wondering where the decade went. James, an 80-year-old with a dreamer's glint in eyes, now framed by creases, carries this sting like a stone in his pocket. Picture him younger, a wiry man with a quick laugh, hair still dark and unruly, hunched over a drafting table in an architect's office, sketching homes that families would fill with life. For 45 years, he built other people's dreams, blueprints unfurling under his steady hands, late nights tracing lines by lamplight, while his own waited patiently in the margins. Retirement was his canvas, a blank slate he'd painted with bold strokes. He'd travel Europe, sketching cathedrals in Florence, sipping espresso in Paris. He'd write a memoir, pages spilling with tales of a boy who grew up sketching in the dust. He'd call old college pals, their voices crackling over beers like they were 20 again. The day he hung up his pencil, he stood in his cluttered study, walls lined with books, a globe gathering dust, grinning at the freedom ahead. The first months delivered. He'd sit on his back deck, the scent of cedar in the air, a cold drink sweating in his hand, the world his to conquer. But later became his mantra. "I'll rest a bit first," he'd say, sinking into the couch, the TV a drone of game shows and newsreels. Days turned to weeks, weeks to years, and the deck grew weathered, the drink flat. The globe stayed unspun, the memoir a single page yellowing in a drawer, the phone silent as old numbers faded from memory. Routine crept in like ivy, mornings lost to coffee and crosswords, afternoons to naps, evenings to channels he flipped through without seeing. A decade slipped by, a slow bleed he didn't feel, until a hip surgery pinned him to a walker, the world shrinking to his living room's 4 walls. He'd sit there, the tick of a clock mocking him, replaying the plans he'd shelved. Florence's spires were just pictures now, the memoir a ghost, his friends scattered or gone. "I thought I had time," he'd murmur to his daughter Sarah, her visits the only break in the quiet. She'd squeeze his hand, her voice gentle. "You still do, Dad." It lit a small fire. He started sketching again, shaky lines of the house he'd built for her mum, stories spilling onto napkins when paper ran out. He called a buddy from 72, their laughter tinny over the line, but warm. It wasn't Europe, but it was something, a late bloom, a defiance of regret. Time's trick is its speed. Retirement feels like forever until it isn't. The original script nails it. Retirees regret postponing, letting hours slip into mindless drift. But it's more visceral than that. Dreams deferred don't just fade, they haunt, a chorus of should-haves that grows louder with age. Health falters, energy wanes, and the someday you banked on slips out of reach. Studies back this up. Retirees who stay active, traveling, creating, connecting, report less regret. Their days, a tapestry of intent. James's neighbors prove it. One, a widow, took up pottery at 75. Her hands shaping clay into bowls she gifts with pride. Another hikes trails, his boots worn, his stories vivid. The happiest don't wait. They plan, they move, they fill the ledger with purpose. Regret isn't inevitable. It's a call to act. James learned late, but not too late. A sketch today, a call tomorrow. A step toward living before the clock winds down. If this cuts close, drop number 6 in the comments. I'd love to know you feel it too. And if you're not subscribed, join us. Hit that button, ring the bell, because the end's near, and it's worth the ride. Final thoughts, retirement looms on the horizon like a lighthouse after a long voyage, a beacon of rest, a promise of freedom after decades of storms weathered and seas crossed. You've pictured it 1,000 times. The desk cleared, the commute traded for a sunrise stroll, the years ahead a canvas of your own making. It's the grand prize, the golden ticket earned through late nights, early mornings, and every grind in between, a chance to finally live on your terms. But what if that light flickers? For too many, the glow dims into a maze of shadows, purpose slipping away like a tide receding, friends fading into distant echoes, money stretching thin as a frayed rope, the mind fogging over, identity unraveling, time trickling through careless fingers. It's not the paradise of travel brochures or the endless leisure of daydreams. It's a chapter that can feel less like freedom and more like a riddle unsolved, a challenge as daunting as any career hurdle left behind. Yet here's the twist. It doesn't have to be that way. These 6 regrets, loss of purpose, isolation, financial strain, mental drift, identity's ghost, wasted time, aren't a sentence. They're a map. They show you the pitfalls, so you can sidestep them, the cracks, so you can mend them, the warnings, so you can rewrite the story. Understanding them now, whether you're on the cusp of retirement or deep in its currents, hands you the pen to craft a different ending, one that hums with meaning, connection, and life. Picture it, a morning not lost to aimless drift, but alive with intent. Maybe it's Thomas, his hands guiding a child's through a science kit, his voice steady with purpose, or Robert, boots crunching leaves on a trail, laughter ringing out with new friends, or John, numbers dancing under his pen, a budget balanced with room for joy. Barbara's there too, her kitchen table, a battlefield of books and ideas, her mind sharp as ever. Richard, standing tall, sharing wisdom with rookies, his badge traded for a mentor's pride. James, sketching shaky lines of a life reclaimed, a late bloom against the sting. These aren't fairy tales, they're choices, threads you can weave into your own tapestry. The happiest retirees don't stumble into fulfillment. They chase it. They seek purpose in a garden's soil or a classroom's chatter, build bonds over coffee or a shared hike, guard their finances with a strategist's eye, challenge their minds with puzzles or new tongues, redefine themselves as creators or guides, and seize time like a kite in a gust, flying it high before the wind dies. Retirement isn't the end of your story. It's a new act, a stage you set with every step you take today. So pause here, under this lighthouse glow, and ask, which of these shadows touched you deepest? Was it the void that echoed in Thomas's quiet porch, the silence that pressed on Robert's chest, the weight John carried in his sleepless nights? Or maybe the fog that clouded Barbara's days, the ghost that haunted Richard's mirror, the sting that pricked James's fading dreams? Whatever it was, let it linger, then let it move you. What can you do now, today, to light your own path? Maybe it's a call to a friend you've lost to time, a budget tweak to ease tomorrow's worry, a class to wake your mind, a project to reclaim your name, a plan to fill tomorrow with purpose. It's not too late. Whether you're 60 with a decade to plan or 80 with a day to live fully, the power's yours. This isn't just a reflection, it's a rallying cry. Drop a comment below. Which regret hit home, and what's one step you'll take to dodge it? Your voice matters. Reading it fuels us, keeps this fire burning. If this journey stirred you, hit that like, subscribe, ring the bell, share it with someone who needs the nudge. Your support keeps us crafting stories that inform, inspire, and ignite. Thanks for walking this road with me. Let's meet again on the next one. Eyes wide, hearts open, ready to shape what's ahead.